Hi, welcome to Cedaredge on our historic downtown business tour. Historic places tell our stories. They remind us of where we come from and enrich our futures. These buildings provide us with both a sense of personal identity and of a larger community. Even though we may choose to celebrate and interpret history differently, it still unifies us. Because of this, we honor our old buildings and preserve both the buildings and their stories for future generations. To prepare for this tour, the Surface Creek Valley Historical Society did some extensive research. We consulted county land and title records, reviewed family documents, and dug through years of old newspapers in search of the truth. Some of the stories you hear in this tour may be different from the stories that you've heard before. Some of those stories didn't pass our test for accuracy. As local historians, we owe our deepest gratitude to a man named Clyde Brewer, who established and published the local newspaper and chronicled even the smallest details of local news for 40 years. In 2019, those old newspapers were digitized by the Historical Society and are now available for your review at coloradohistoricnewspapers.org. You'll hear more about Clyde later in this tour. You can support the preservation of history here in the Surface Creek Valley by making a donation to the Historic Society at pioneertown.org/donate. You can also show your support by becoming a member of the Historical Society. Members get free access to the Pioneertown Museum and advance notification of all our programs. We'd be most grateful for your support and hope you enjoy the tour today. Now, before we start the tour, I'd like to paint a bigger picture of historical Cedaredge in the Surface Creek Valley for you. Colorado became a state in 1876. The first white settlers arrived in the Cedaredge area 5 years later in 1881, after the U.S. Army removed the native Nuche people, who were more commonly referred to as the Ute Indians. Prior to the removal of our indigenous population, some prospective settlers scouted the land in this valley, including Captain William Spaulding. Some may have even built a crude structure here, but no one could claim land. It was property of the Nuche, per the treaty with the U.S. government. There are stories of pioneers who were told by the native people to move on, and while that story is credible, we haven't found any documentation to confirm it. We start our tour today at the corner of Main Street and Grand Mesa Drive. Notice that rather than moving in a straight line, Grand Mesa Drive, otherwise known as Highway 65, curves and meanders as it follows an old Ute trail and the path of Surface Creek. Most property lines in the western U.S. are based on geometrically square sections, measuring 1 square mile, as originally surveyed by the U.S. government. Cedaredge Main Street follows the straight USGS line dividing sections 20 and 29. Maybe you've noticed that major roads often occur at 1 mile intervals. The patent for the 160 acres north and east of this spot was issued to a man named John Juder, and the 160 acres southwest was issued to Pierre Settle. Both of these patents were cash sales and not issued by the authority of the Desert Land Act or the Homestead Act. When the first white settlers arrived in Cedaredge, it was part of Gunnison County. Delta and Montrose counties were subdivided from Gunnison County in 1883, and 2 new counties were created. Settlers came to this land from all over the world, including California, Nebraska, even Europe. Some of the earliest settlers had been miners and prospectors in Colorado's gold and silver mines. But by the 1900s, people started to open businesses to support the farmers and ranchers here in this valley. The first settlers probably brought a few cows and some chickens. Before they could plant crops, they had to clear the land of sagebrush and rocks. The earliest settlers claimed land near one of the natural creeks, but they still had to dig ditches to move water to irrigate their farms. Eventually, they accomplished an amazing network of dams and ditches to control and supply water to the entire valley. For more information about the ingenious water supply system, visit the water office at Pioneertown, just 2 blocks south of here. The first fruit trees were planted in this valley in 1882, and soon the entire valley was dotted with fruit orchards, including apples, peaches, pears, apricots, and prunes. In 1893, Delta County took 30 of the 40 first prize awards for fruit at the Chicago World's Fair, and in 1922, Denver and Rio Grande Railway reported that 407 railcar loads of apples were shipped from the Austin Depot to market, compared to 85 carloads of cattle. You can learn more about the fruit and cattle industries and see the Austin Train Depot at Pioneertown. The first general store in Cedaredge was opened in 1901 by a man named Joseph Hogriff. It was right over there on the southeast corner of Grand Mesa Drive and Main Street. The Hogriff store played an important part in the development of the town of Cedaredge. Hogriff helped supplement the incomes of many locals by buying hides and cream from them. The store also became the area's second post office. Before Hogriff's store, residents had to take a horse-drawn wagon to get to Delta for supplies, a 4 to 5 hour trip each way. Can you imagine living someplace where it took a half a day to get to the market? The Hogriff family lived upstairs and the store was downstairs. A couple other families operated the store until 1927 when a man named Jacob Wick acquired the business. The store was operated by the Wick family until it closed in 1963. The building was torn down in 1965 and the lot stood empty until 1975 when the building you see over there now was built. By 1919, Cedaredge had grown significantly. In addition to the old Hogriff store, there was a furniture store and a garage across Grand Mesa Drive. The Cedaredge Meeting Hall was across the street, and further down Grand Mesa Drive, which was then called Main Street, was a second-hand store, a restaurant, and at least 2 additional buildings. Feel free to pause this recording and look more closely at the map from the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company in 1919.